Hey crafty friends, welcome. This is Donna. I'm here with a fun slimline Christmas inspired card to share with you today. I'll be using a couple of the newly released products and an older Christmas release stamp set. Now there is a product reveal video for the Slimline Vertical Sentiments Stamp that I'm using, and that just gives you a little more details on this stamp. I will have a link for that in the card up above. Here I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock to create my background. I'll be blending in Tumbled Glass, Salty Ocean, and Blueprint Sketch. I am using my foam ink blending tool to add the ink onto my background, and I've started with Tumbled Glass. Now, originally I had planned to leave a portion of that bottom white, but I do at the end go ahead and add tumbled glass all the way just about to the edge of the bottom panel. So after I add the tumbled glass, I come back in with Salty Ocean, and then where those two colors meet, I just go back and forth using my ink tool to blend out that harsh line. Then I took Salty Ocean all the way up to the top of the panel, and then I'm coming in with Blueprint Sketch to ink blend a portion of that top panel, and then again I'll just use my ink blending tools to go back and forth across that transition line and blend out any harsh lines that may have been left behind. And then here's where I kind of decide I'm going to bring the tumbled glass all the way down. I do come in with a little bit of black soot just at the top to darken up the edges. And then I'll bring the Blueprint Sketch in a little bit and just continually blending all the way down until I get to the bottom with the tumbled glass. So once I have my panel all blended, I'll spritz some water using a distress sprayer, and then I'll blot that dry with a clean paper towel. And it wouldn't be one of my cards unless I do some splatters. So for this one, since the splatters are going to mimic the falling snow, we're just going to stick with the white. I have my splatter box and I have my panel in there. I'm just diluting a little bit of acrylic paint with some water, and then I've taken a clean brush and I'm using that to pick up the paint and splatter across the entire panel. And then I can set that aside to dry while I work on coloring my images. I stamped out all of the images using Memento Tuxedo black ink onto Nina Solar white 80-pound cardstock, and on screen, I'm just sharing how I colored the gingerbread house, but I do have a coordinating blog post listed down below, which has some close-up pictures as well as the entire color combinations that I used for the rest of the characters. I started with E47 and laid that down in behind the roof frosting. Then I brought in a little bit of E44, followed by E43, and finally E42 in the center of that gingerbread house. And then I'm going to do the big gingerbread man. I'm just using E43 and E42. Then I come in with E47 and I do some dots, detail, just to create a little bit of texture. I do come back with that E47 and add a little bit of that dot texture onto the house. And then here I'm coming in to do the roof. I believe this is C1, but it's just a little too light, so I do use B000 to add a little bit of shading. And then I'll come back in with C3 and just add that at the bottom edges. And then I bring in, again, the C3 and C1 to do some dot detail, just to create texture. For the frosting on the side of the house and the top of the door, it's just so little that I just do some dot detail just for a little bit of texture and to create shading. For the door and a couple of the candies, I'm going to use some greens. I started by laying down YG01, then I came in with G28. Then I'm going to grab YG17 and blend that out. And then I think I grab a YG06, and again I'll grab the YG01 and just finish out the entire blend, going over the entire image. For a couple of these little candies, I'm using B05, B01, and then I'll blend everything out with B000. For all of the items that I color red, I'm using an R59, R39, R27, and R24. Now for some of these smaller images, I'll omit either an R39 or an R30 or 27 rather, just because it gets a little too cumbersome to blend that many markers. So for like the candy canes, I think I've added R59, R27, and R24 just to give it a little bit of shading. But for like the Santa suit and Mrs. Claus's suit, I do bring in all 4 of the colors that I've listed. So this is a Copic Safe Black outline pen that I'm using, and I just draw in the little gingerbread man's eyes, and then I'm bringing in my white gel pen and adding highlight details on the candies and the door, and I do some highlights on everybody's eyes. I think it just gives it a nice finishing touch. So once I finish coloring all of the images, I've used my Scan and Cut and I've cut them out, and then I can set that aside to finish working on the background. So this is the newly released Slimline die called Slimline Fancy Frame Die, and I've used the largest die from this set to die cut the ink blended background. And then we're going to go ahead and stamp out the sentiment. Originally I thought I would create a banner using the Christmas sentiment, but I do change my mind, and after stamping it out and white heat embossing the sentiment onto a piece of red cardstock, I do go ahead and trim around the letters just using my small scissors. So here I have a piece of red cardstock. I've treated the panel with anti-static powder, and then I'll ink up my sentiment using Versamark ink. And for whatever reason, it seems to be easier for me to stamp it sideways. So after I've stamped that down, I'll add some white embossing powder, and then I can tap off the excess and melt the embossing powder using my heat gun. And if I have any stray embossing powder, I just have a little dry paintbrush that it's just to remove embossing powder. I don't use it for any other reason. So at this point I have all of my elements ready and I can start adhering everything together. I've been trying to use up the fun foam that I've had building up in my stash for what seems like an eternity. So I just took a piece of it and I trimmed it up to fit my panel, and then I can go ahead and add some glue and adhere that down to a slimline card base that I created. The slimline card base is cut from a piece of white cardstock down to 8.5 by 7, and then I've scored the panel at 3.5. This way just a little bit of the white peaks behind the topmost panel. Now here's the sentiment that I've trimmed up, and I'm just using these foam strips to add to the back, and I can go ahead and pop that up. I've also die cut a piece of white cardstock with the Slimline Fancy Frame die just to get the same edge, and then I trimmed it down to create a snowbank. Here I'm popping up that snowbank, and then I can kind of press that down in place using some liquid adhesive. I'm just trying to line up so that the edges line up exactly, and then I can lay out my images that I plan to use just so I could get a visual feel of how everything's going to look. And then once I'm happy with the placement, I do go ahead and pop up all of the images using fun foam and finish everything off just with a couple of those additional images that I colored, like the candies and the candy cane. So that will do it for my card. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching. If you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments, when do you start making your Christmas cards? Or if you make your Christmas cards to send out. I'm one of these people that just seems to never get the cards out on time, so my family at this point knows they'll be getting theirs either very close to Christmas by sheer luck or just after. In any event, if you're new to the Whimsy Stamps channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to be notified the next time Whimsy Stamps uploads a video. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will see you next time.